I never thought I'd be posting this. My hands are shaking so bad I can barely type. NGL, I'm a mess. I'm Ethan, 38, stay-at-home dad to Owen and Chloe. Sarah, my wife, she was a pilot. We had a pretty normal, stable life for 12 years, or so I thought. This all started the night a cop showed up at our dinner table, and nothing has been normal since. I still see it in slow motion sometimes. Owen, my son, he's 10, was telling Chloe, who's 8, about some stupid Minecraft trick, both of them giggling. We were all at the kitchen table just finishing up dinner. Normal Tuesday night, Sarah was supposed to be back Thursday. She was a corporate pilot, flew all over the place. Her job was a huge part of our life, you know? It meant I could be here for the kids full time, which was our dream. My dream, anyway. Everything felt stable, secure. Then there was a knock. Not the friendly kind. This was firm, official. I opened the door, and there stood a cop. My stomach just dropped. Immediately, I thought accident. Some fender bender? Nothing serious. But the look on his face, man, that wasn't fender bender energy. He asked, "Are you Ethan Miller?" My heart was already pounding against my ribs. I said yes. He took a deep breath like he was delivering a speech he'd rehearsed 1,000 times. He said, "Miller, I'm Officer Rodriguez. I'm here regarding your wife, Sarah Miller." And then the words hit me like a physical blow. "Her plane is missing." My ears started ringing. Missing? What the hell does that even mean? I could feel my face going numb, my hands starting to shake already. The kids heard it. Owen stopped mid-sentence, his eyes wide. Chloe, she just stared, confused. I forced myself to move, to shut the door, to keep them from seeing me completely lose it. I grabbed my phone, calling Sarah's company, then straight to the Coast Guard, my voice cracking, repeating the flight number. Anything I could remember. It was all a blur of frantic energy, trying to project calm for the kids while my insides were screaming. Owen started crying, asking, "Is Mom okay?" And I just hugged them both tight, repeating, "She'll be fine, she's strong, she's the best pilot, we'll find her." Even though I was already pretty sure I was lying, it felt like forever, but it was probably only an hour or two later when the call came boom. From the Coast Guard, my throat was so tight I could barely breathe. They found wreckage. They confirmed it was Sarah's plane. No survivors. No survivors. That phrase just echoed in my head over and over. It didn't feel real. It couldn't be real. Sarah was just gone, just like that. The stability, the life we built, the future we planned, all gone. Obliterated. I felt like I was floating outside my own body, watching myself deliver the news to my kids. Owen sobbed into my shoulder. Chloe, she just went silent, eyes vacant. It was the worst night of my life, hands down. The memorial service was a blur. 1,000 faces, sympathetic smiles, mumbled condolences. I was just trying to keep it together for Owen and Chloe. Felt like a performance, TBH. Like I was on autopilot, just going through the motions. Sarah's colleagues were there, a lot of pilots, flight attendants, company execs. That's when I met Jessica Stone. She introduced herself as David Stone's wife. David was Sarah's co-pilot on that flight. We were both standing there, two widows, sharing this horrific, impossible grief. She looked detached, though, like she was also just going through the motions, but in a different way. A little too calm. IDK, maybe it was just my own fucked up perception at the time. We talked for a bit, exchanging the usual platitudes about what a tragedy and they're in a better place. Then out of nowhere, Jessica just leaned in a little, her voice low. "You know," she said, "David and I were actually getting divorced. He's had a history of affairs." Well, she shrugged like it was an everyday thing, a minor detail in the face of death. I just stared at her, my mind reeling. Affairs? David? What the hell was she talking about? It was such a weird thing to say at a memorial, such a sudden, jarring piece of information. I didn't know how to react, so I just mumbled something vague and excused myself. It was the first little crack, the first flicker of a red flag that something didn't quite add up. But I chalked it up to grief, to her own pain. People react weird, right? About a week later, I was back home trying to get the kids back into some kind of routine, still feeling like a ghost. Another knock on the door. This time it was two guys in suits. They introduced themselves as GBI agents Peterson and Davis, Georgia Bureau of Investigation. My heart sank. More questions, more pain. They said they were doing a routine investigation into the crash, just tying up loose ends. They wanted to ask about Sarah. I invited them in thinking, fine, whatever helps closure. They started with the expected stuff. When did you last see her? Any calls before the flight? But then it got personal. They wanted to know about my job. I told them I was a stay-at-home dad, always had been since Owen was born. Peterson, the older one, kind of raised an eyebrow. So Sarah was the sole provider. NGL, it felt a little judgy, like they were implying something about me not working, about our arrangement. I explained that it was our choice, that Sarah loved her Damar, loved flying, and I loved being there for the kids. She traveled a lot then? Davis asked, scribbling in his notebook. Almost constantly, right? Yeah, she did. That was her job. They kept pushing on that, on her travel, on my being home. It was making me uncomfortable. Then Peterson leaned forward a bit. Mr. Miller, did you notice any changes in Sarah's behavior recently? Anything at all? I shook my head, confused. Changes? No, not really. She was Sarah. He paused, then said, we've heard she was up for a promotion. Something that would significantly reduce her travel. Did she ever mention that to you? A promotion? That would reduce her travel? No, absolutely not. Sarah loved flying. It was her life. She never, ever mentioned anything like that. The agents just exchanged a look, a quiet, knowing look that sent a shiver down my spine. The way they said changes and this promotion, it didn't feel routine anymore. It felt like they knew something or suspected something that I didn't. Like the crash wasn't just an accident. And it was then, sitting there with those GBI agents, that the real fear, the real confusion started to sink in. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After the GBI agents left, my head was just spinning. Missing briefcase? Changes in behavior? Promotion to reduce travel? None of it made sense, but I had to focus on the kids, on practical stuff, the bills, how we were going to manage. Sarah had been the primary earner. Her income was substantial. So the next day, I called her company's HR department. I needed to know about survivor benefits, life insurance, all that stuff that felt morbid but was suddenly critical. The woman on the phone, Ms. Jenkins, sounded sympathetic, but then her tone shifted. Mr. Miller, I understand this is difficult, but all benefits are currently on hold. My stomach clenched. On hold? What do you mean? She cleared her throat, a little too loudly. Until the GBI investigation is officially closed and they clear the case. It's standard procedure for any incident under federal investigation. Standard procedure? My wife just died in a plane crash, and they're holding her life insurance. It felt less like standard procedure and more like a massive flashing red sign that something was seriously wrong. NGL, the desperation started to creep in. How were we supposed to live? A few days later, the GBI agents were back, Peterson and Davis. They weren't smiling. This time they skipped the pleasantries. Davis cut right to it. Mr. Miller, we need to be blunt. Was Sarah involved with anyone else? My jaw practically dropped. What? No, absolutely not. Sarah loved me. She loved our kids. She wouldn't do something like that. My voice was rising. I could feel the anger starting to bubble. It felt like an accusation, like they were trying to blame her or me. Peterson stared at me, his gaze unblinking. Are you absolutely certain? Are you aware of any relationships, romantic or otherwise, that Sarah may have kept from you? I pushed back hard. I told you no. We had a great marriage. We trusted each other implicitly. I was a stay-at-home dad because that was our decision. We were a team. I said it, and I believed it. Or I desperately wanted to believe it. But that seed of doubt planted by Jessica Stone's bizarre comment, and now watered by the GBI's relentless questioning, was starting to sprout. My hands were shaking a little despite myself. I felt like I was defending Sarah against ghosts. Then Peterson leaned forward again, his voice dropping slightly. Mr. Miller, there's something else. In the wreckage, among the personal effects that were recovered, there's a briefcase. It belonged to Sarah. It's empty, and we have reason to believe it contains sensitive documents, financial documents, possibly. An empty briefcase? Sensitive financial documents? What the hell was going on? My mind raced. Sarah was meticulous. She never lost anything, especially not important work stuff. And empty? It felt deliberately emptied. Was someone looking for something? Was it stolen? Or did she empty it herself? My head was pounding. In the midst of all this, I still had to deal with the practicalities of death. I started the legal process to obtain Sarah's official pass-away certificate. It was just more paperwork, more forms, more bureaucratic hoops, but each step felt like another nail in the coffin of our life together. It was official. She was gone. While handling all of this, I realized I needed to check on Sarah's family trust fund. Her parents had set it up for her years ago, a kind of emergency nest egg. I called Uncle Ben, Sarah's uncle, who was the trustee. He's a sweet old guy, a little bit scattered, but always meant well. I asked him if there was anything in the trust that might help with the kids' education, or just to tide us over until I figured out the insurance situation. Uncle Ben hemmed and hawed for a bit, and then said, "Well, Ethan, the trust is certainly there for Sarah's beneficiaries, meaning you and the children now. But you know, Sarah has been drawing on it pretty regularly for a while now. Quarterly payments for the last year or so." My stomach lurched. "What? Quarterly payments? Uncle Ben, what are you talking about?" Sarah never mentioned anything about drawing from the trust. I knew our finances. We were comfortable, not rich, but stable. Sarah wouldn't have needed to touch that money without telling me. It was for emergencies. Uncle Ben sounded confused. "Oh, didn't she tell you?" "Yes, she started taking out a substantial amount every 3 months. Said it was for a personal investment opportunity she was pursuing. Didn't want to bother you with the details until it was finalized. You know how private Sarah could be sometimes." Private, yeah, Sarah could be private about some things, but not about money like that. Not a substantial amount, taken out quarterly for a year. A personal investment opportunity that she never told me about her husband? That was a massive red flag. My head was spinning again. Lies? Secrets? Later that day, feeling completely overwhelmed and needing some kind of distraction, I decided to go through some of Sarah's things. Not to pack them away, just to feel close to her, maybe. I ended up in her side of the closet. I found myself running my hand over her clothes, the scent of her perfume still faintly clinging to a silk scarf. That's when I saw it, tucked away in a shoebox on the top shelf, behind a pile of old sweaters. A small, elegant velvet box. It wasn't jewelry I'd ever given her. I pulled it down, my hands trembling. It was from Goldberg & Sons, a fancy jewelry store. I opened it, my heart pounding with a strange mix of dread and curiosity. Inside, nestled in the satin lining, was the impression of a ring. But the box was empty. It was clearly a diamond engagement ring box, an empty engagement ring box. My breath caught in my throat. What the hell? An engagement ring? Who was it for? My mind immediately went to the GBI's questions, to Jessica Stone's comment, to Uncle Ben's revelation. It was all starting to coalesce into a terrifying, impossible picture. I felt sick. I frantically searched the box, the shoebox, the surrounding area. And then, tucked into a separate, zippered compartment of her duffel bag that I'd never seen her open, I found another velvet box. Smaller. Also from Goldberg & Sons. I opened it. Empty. But this one was clearly for a man's wedding band. A matching set. 2 empty ring boxes. One for a woman's diamond ring. One for a man's band. Both from a high-end jeweler. Hidden. Sarah. My wife who just died. What the hell was she doing? What was she planning? My world, already shattered by grief, was now completely imploding with suspicion. My hands were shaking so bad, I almost dropped the phone as I dialed Goldberg & Sons. It was late, but I didn't care. I needed answers. When someone finally picked up, I demanded to speak to a manager, my voice raw with a mix of grief and rage. I told them I was Ethan Miller, Sarah Miller's husband, and I had questions about some recent purchases. The manager was initially hesitant, citing privacy, but I pushed, my voice rising. My wife just died in a plane crash. I found these empty boxes. I need to know what she bought. The urgency that barely contained hysteria in my voice must have gotten to him. He put me on hold, and I could hear his muffled conversation. When he came back, his tone was softer, more apologetic. Mr. Miller, I'm so sorry for your loss. I've looked up the purchase. Your wife bought two identical diamond engagement rings, not a wedding set, both quite elaborate. Two identical engagement rings. Not a set for us? My blood ran cold. And a man's band? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, a very expensive one. Then he added, and the rings were picked up in person by a Sarah Smith. Sarah Smith? My wife's name was Sarah Miller. My brain was short-circuiting. Who the hell was Sarah Smith? Was it a mistake? A disguise? My mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation. But there was none. It felt like I was losing my mind. This was a whole new level of betrayal. I hung up, the phone slipping from my sweaty grip. Back in Sarah's closet, I started tearing through everything. Every box, every drawer, every hidden compartment. I was desperate. I felt like a detective in my own home, sifting through the wreckage of my marriage. And then, tucked away in a small velvet pouch at the bottom of her main jewelry box, hidden beneath layers of costume jewelry, I found it. A tiny, unmarked key. Not a house key, not a car key. A safety deposit box key. My heart was pounding, a desperate rhythm of fear and anticipation. The next morning, I took the key to every bank in town. It was tedious, frustrating, but I was driven by a frantic need to know. Finally, at a small, unassuming bank on the other side of town, the key fit. The clerk looked at me strangely when I said I was Sarah Miller's husband, but the key was proof enough. My hands were shaking so hard I fumbled with the yank, almost dropping the box. And what I found inside, NGL, it obliterated everything I thought I knew. First, a passport. Not for Sarah Miller, but for Sarah Smith. Same face, different name, different birth date. A fake passport. My vision blurred. Then under that, a stack of cash. Hundreds of thousands, neatly banded. It was unreal, like something out of a movie. Below the cash, there were bank statements. Not from our joint accounts, but from several offshore accounts. Swiss banks, Cayman Islands. And they held millions, millions I had no idea about. Millions she had been squirreling away. Then another smaller key like the first, but clearly for something else entirely. Maybe another box. And finally, the document that truly broke me. A prenuptial agreement. Not for our marriage, not for me. This one was dated a few months ago, and it was between Sarah Smith and Mark Jensen. Mark Jensen, that name just screamed off the page. It wasn't just a fling, a one-night stand. This was planned, meticulous. It all clicked into place with a sickening thud. The missing briefcase, the GBI's questions, the promotion to reduce her travel, the secret trust fund payments, the hidden ring boxes, the fake passport, the offshore accounts, the prenuptial agreement with Mark Jensen. She wasn't dead. She faked her death. My wife, the woman I loved, the mother of my children, had orchestrated this elaborate, cruel, unimaginable fraud to disappear and start a new life with another man, Mark Jensen. The grief I had felt, the pure, unadulterated pain of loss, transformed into a burning, white-hot rage that consumed me. I realized then that she hadn't just faked her death. She had systematically, ruthlessly diverted company funds over time. It wasn't just our money she was stealing, it was her employers. All those business trips, all that travel, it wasn't just part of her job. It was her opportunity to build this new identity, to set up these accounts, to prepare her escape. She had been living a double life for God knows how long, right under my nose. I had been gaslit for years. I just didn't know it. My entire marriage was a lie. I don't know how I drove to Jessica Stone's house, but I did. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I barely remember knocking, just pounding on her door, my voice hoarse as I practically screamed her name when she opened it. She looked startled, a little scared. Good. Jessica, I choked out, holding up the prenup, the passport, the bank statements. Did you know? Did you know about Sarah and David, about Mark Jensen? About all of this? Her face went pale. Her eyes flickered to the documents in my hand, then back to my enraged, broken face. She didn't try to deny it. She just slumped against the doorframe, defeated. "Oh my God, Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I, I suspected David was having an affair. He was always so secretive with his phone late nights, but I didn't know. I didn't know about this. She gestured vaguely at the papers. He used to meet up with Sarah Smith on his layovers. He even talked about helping her with some side business venture, that's what he called it. He was supposed to get a cut. That's why we were getting divorced. He cleaned out our accounts too, said he was going to make a fortune with Sarah Smith. "He cleaned out your accounts?" I asked, the words barely escaping my throat. "And he was having an affair with Sarah?" Jessica nodded slowly, tears finally starting to stream down her face. "Yes, I just thought it was another one of his flings. I had no idea it was this elaborate. He was helping her, wasn't he? Helping her disappear, helping her defraud the company." The truth, raw and ugly, settled heavy in the air. David Stone, the co-pilot, wasn't just a casualty. He was an accomplice, and he was also Sarah's lover. The whole plane crash was a cover-up for a massive financial fraud and a double betrayal. My wife, the woman I buried, was alive, and she had taken everything. After leaving Jessica Stone's, I drove home in a daze, my mind a chaotic whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and a sickening clarity. I had to call the GBI. My hands were still shaking, but now it wasn't from grief. It was from a burning, righteous fury. I dialed the number for Agents Peterson and Davis. "I have more information," I said, my voice tight and strained, "and it's not what you think." They agreed to come over immediately. When they arrived, I laid everything out on the kitchen table: the fake passport for Sarah Smith, the offshore bank statements showing millions, the prenup with Mark Jensen, the Goldberg and Sons receipts for 2 diamond engagement rings, and the man's band. I even showed them the small, unmarked key from Sarah's jewelry box. I watched their faces as they processed each piece of evidence. Their skepticism slowly melted away, replaced by grim understanding, then shock. Peterson picked up the passport, examining it closely. Davis flipped through the bank statements, his jaw tightening with each page. "Mr. Miller," Peterson said, his voice quiet, "this is, substantial. We'll need to take all of this with us. We're launching a full-scale investigation." They were gone for days, but it felt like weeks. I was in a constant state of anxiety, jumpy, unable to sleep, just pacing the house, trying to make sense of the monstrous lie that had been my life. The kids were confused by my mood, but I just told them I was helping the police figure things out. How could I tell them their mother had faked her death? Then the call came. Peterson. His voice was serious, almost grave. "Mr. Miller, we've corroborated your findings. Sarah Smith is indeed an alias. The offshore accounts are real, and they're holding millions. This is far bigger than we initially thought." He continued, dropping bombshell after bombshell. The flight recorders from the wreckage, the forensic analysis showed something incredibly disturbing. The impact on the ground, the way the debris was scattered, the fuel burn, it's consistent with the plane being destroyed after its occupants had already disembarked. It wasn't a mechanical failure mid-flight with people on board. My breath hitched. "What? What are you saying?" "We believe the actual plane, the one Sarah and David Stone were supposed to be on, was swapped, replaced with a pre-programmed, identical model, set to crash at a specific time and location to create the illusion of an accident." I leaned against the wall, my legs suddenly weak. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a criminal masterpiece. It was so cold, so calculated. This wasn't Sarah. This couldn't be her. But the evidence was screaming otherwise. "And Mark Jensen," Davis interjected. "We've identified him. He's also a pilot, a former colleague of Sarah's from years ago. He had some serious financial troubles, a history of shady deals. We believe he's her primary accomplice, and likely her lover." So the prenup wasn't just some weird future plan. It was already happening. My wife planning to marry this guy while I was raising our kids, thinking she was flying off on another business trip. "There's more," Peterson added. "We've also identified another individual involved, a Dr. Emily Roberts, Also a pilot, a longtime friend of Sarah's, apparently. She has a background in advanced flight programming and drone technology. We believe she was instrumental in setting up the decoy plane. Emily Roberts, Sarah's friend from pilot school, the one who always acted so sweet and supportive when she came over for barbecues? NGL, this was getting even crazier. It felt like everyone I knew was in on it. I then gave them everything I had on our finances, Sarah's company expense reports, her travel itineraries, everything. The GBI's forensic accountants went to work, and it didn't take them long to confirm what I already suspected. Sarah had been systematically siphoning funds from her company for years. It was intricate, hidden in plain sight through inflated travel expenses, fake vendor invoices, and ghost projects. Millions. She had been building her new life, funded entirely by stolen corporate money. The picture was complete, horrifyingly clear. Mr. Miller, Peterson said gravely, we now believe Sarah Miller and David Stone were never on that plane. Their bodies were never found because they weren't there to begin with. The crash was staged to give them new identities, new lives, with millions of dollars in stolen funds. It was a gut punch that somehow hurt more than the initial grief. She wasn't dead. She had orchestrated this elaborate, cruel charade, leaving me to mourn a ghost, raising our children alone, all while she was off living her best life with another man. The rage, the raw, visceral anger was overwhelming. And the missing briefcase, I asked, suddenly remembering that detail. Davis nodded slowly. We believe that briefcase contained the final pieces of their scheme, the last bits of documentation needed for their new identities, the final transfers, maybe even the remote detonator for the decoy plane. Whatever it was critical, and it disappeared with them. The web of deception had unraveled, but it left behind a tangled, agonizing mess. My world wasn't just shattered, it had been built on a foundation of lies. And now I had to figure out how to pick up the pieces, not just for myself, but for Owen and Chloe, who still believed their mother was gone. After I laid out everything for the GBI, my life shifted again, dramatically. Agents Peterson and Davis informed me that Owen, Chloe, and I were now under protection. For your safety, Mr. Miller, Peterson had said, and to ensure the integrity of the investigation. We don't know who else is involved or what they're capable of. It felt like I was in a movie, but this was my terrifying reality. Plainclothes agents were always discreetly around our house, and I had to be careful with my phone, knowing it was probably being monitored. The hardest part by far was the instruction to maintain the facade of mourning. She can't suspect, Mr. Miller, Davis explained. If she thinks you know, she might disappear for good, or worse, she might come after you or the children. For now, in public, she's still gone. You're still the grieving widower. Every sympathetic glance, every mumbled, I'm so sorry for your loss, felt like a fresh stab wound. I had to look some and act devastated, when inside I was a boiling cauldron of anger and betrayal. Holding it all in, especially around Owen and Chloe, was tearing me apart. They would ask about their mom, talk about missing her, and I'd just hug them, my throat tight, wishing I could tell them the truth, but knowing I couldn't. It was an unbearable burden, a daily performance of the most horrific kind. Meanwhile, the GBI was working tirelessly. Their forensic accountants were tracing every single penny from Sarah's offshore accounts. These weren't just random transfers. This was a meticulously planned financial network. They followed the digital breadcrumbs, the complex web of shell corporations and untraceable transactions. And then they hit something significant. Mr. Miller, Peterson called one evening, his voice tight with urgency. We found a pattern. Regular, substantial transfers from Sarah's offshore accounts to two specific individuals. My heart pounded. Who? I managed to ask. Your Uncle Ben, he said, and Dr. Emily Roberts. Uncle Ben? My sweet, slightly doddery uncle, Sarah's trustee, and Emily Roberts, the friend who helped build the decoy plane? My stomach clenched. They were deeper in this than I thought. Uncle Ben, who had unknowingly revealed Sarah's secret trust fund withdrawals, was now actively receiving money from her stolen millions. He wasn't just complicit, he was an active participant in her new life, and Emily Roberts was obviously being paid for her services. This changes things, Davis added. This gives us a way in. They're her lifeline. She needs them for cacao, for information. We're going to set up a sting operation. The plan was brilliant, if terrifying. They'd monitor Uncle Ben, knowing Sarah would eventually contact him to get money. They waited patiently for a few days that felt like an eternity. And then, it happened. The GBI surveillance team observed Uncle Ben making a significant withdrawal from a bank branch. Not his usual bank, but a specific one they had flagged. A branch known for its discreet service and high net worth clients. It was a massive amount of cash, enough to raise suspicions if you knew what to look for. The GBI covertly followed Uncle Ben from the bank. He didn't go home. Instead, he drove way out into the rural countryside, on winding back roads I didn't even recognize. My phone, which was now equipped with a special tracker the GBI had installed, showed his movements in real time, a tiny dot moving across a digital map. The tension was almost unbearable. I felt like I was holding my breath 4 hours, and then the dot stopped. At a secluded farmhouse, miles from anything, the GBI agents relayed what they saw. It was a remote property, old, with overgrown fields. They watched from a distance, using high-tech surveillance equipment. And then a clear, undeniable image flashed across the screen they had set up in my living room. There she was, Sarah, my wife, alive, getting out of a coma. Walking towards the farmhouse, my vision blurred for a second, a cold wave of shock washing over me. She looked different, her hair a bit longer, maybe a little tan, but it was undeniably her. My breath hitched in my throat. She met Uncle Ben and Dr. Emily Roberts on the porch. They embraced, laughing. While I was here mourning her, struggling to hold my family together, she was out there, living, laughing with her accomplices. The rage was immediate, fiery, consuming. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash something. She looked happy. Happy. This entire nightmare started with a lie, and it cost me everything. The emotional toll of this journey, the constant struggle between truth and deception, it's been immense. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The GBI raid team was already in position, surrounding the farmhouse. Special tactical units, silent and swift, moved through the fields, taking up their places. The agents inside my house were quiet, their faces grim, focused. "This is it, Mr. Miller," Peterson said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "We're going in." My heart hammered against my ribs, a furious drumbeat. It was finally happening. The moment of truth. The GBI raid was like something out of a movie. Silent, precise, and incredibly fast. I watched it unfold on the surveillance screen. My heart in my throat. Tactical agents swarmed the farmhouse, bursting through doors and windows. Within minutes, it was over. Peterson's voice came through the comms. "Suspects secured. Sarah Miller, Mark Jensen, Uncle Ben, and Dr. Emily Roberts are in custody." I breathed a sigh of relief, a heavy, shaky exhale I hadn't realized I was holding. But then Peterson added, "We found another individual, Mr. Miller, David Stone. He's alive. And he's also in custody." David Stone, alive. The co-pilot who was supposedly dead. My mind reeled again. Another layer to this twisted onion. It just kept getting worse, more elaborate, more unbelievable. What kind of person orchestrated something like this? What kind of monster? The agents found the missing briefcase at the farmhouse too. It was exactly as Davis had theorized. Crammed with bundles of key, multiple fake passports and IDs, burner phones, and incriminating documents, including detailed financial ledgers for their offshore accounts. It was the smoking gun, the final piece of the puzzle that confirmed every horrifying suspicion. The interrogations began almost immediately. I was kept updated by Peterson and Davis, who understood my need to know. Sarah, unsurprisingly, was a stone wall. She maintained her defiant stance, denying everything, even with the physical evidence staring her in the face. She claimed she had been kidnapped, held against her will, that Sarah Smith was a case of mistaken identity, and that all the documents were fabrications. NGL, she was good, a master manipulator to the very end. She looked them in the eye and lied with absolute conviction. It almost made me doubt myself for a second. But then I remembered the cold, hard proof. But Mark Jensen, her alleged lover, wasn't as strong. Under the relentless questioning of the GBI, the pressure got to him. He broke. He started talking, and once he started, he couldn't stop. He confessed to the entire elaborate scheme, every sickening detail. He described how Sarah had masterminded everything. She was the brains, the architect of the fake plane crash. She had studied aviation forensics, learned about drone technology, and identified the perfect type of plane to swap. He detailed how they, Sarah and he, would take off in the legitimate plane, fly it to a remote coordinates, and then, using specialized parachutes, they would bail out. The actual plane would then be taken over by a pre-programmed drone system, which would fly it to the predetermined crash site in ensuring it was utterly destroyed. It was chillingly precise. He even confirmed that Emily Roberts provided the drone technology and did the modifications. The level of detail, the cold calculation, it made my stomach churn. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was an act of pure evil. Next was David Stone. When confronted with Mark's confession and the evidence from the briefcase, he caved quickly. He wasn't as cunning as Sarah or as committed to the lie. He was scared. Scared of Sarah, scared of the consequences, scared of the GBI. He confessed his involvement in the fraud, how he helped Sarah with the company's internal accounting to divert funds, how he used his position to facilitate flight plan changes and access to the necessary equipment. He even admitted to the affair with Sarah, confirming Jessica's earlier, heartbreaking revelation. He confessed that his family's money problems made him vulnerable, and Sarah had exploited that, promising him a cut of the millions. He was just a pawn, terrified of Sarah's ruthlessness. Dr. Emily Roberts, the friend, was next. Faced with Mark's testimony and the forensic evidence pointing to her specific expertise, she admitted her role. She confirmed providing the drone plane, modifying its systems for remote control, and programming its flight path to the crash site. She claimed Sarah had convinced her it was for a top-secret government project involving a new kind of aerial surveillance and that the crash was a simulated exercise to test a new emergency protocol. She said she was duped, but NGL, it sounded like a flimsy excuse for someone so intelligent. She was getting paid. She knew what she was doing. Finally, Uncle Ben. He looked utterly devastated, a broken man. He confessed to aiding Sarah, receiving the funds and acting as her local contact, essentially her runner for cash. He swore he didn't know the full extent of the scheme. He claimed Sarah had played on his emotions, on his family loyalty, telling him she was in deep financial trouble with some dangerous people and needed his help to escape. He said she had threatened to harm me and the children if he didn't cooperate. He was terrified, he said, and just wanted to protect his family. He broke down sobbing, begging for forgiveness, insisting he never meant any harm. Their confessions painted a complete, undeniable picture of Sarah's monstrous deception. She had faked her death, stole millions, implicated multiple people, and left her own children to mourn a ghost. The rage was still there, a burning fire, but now it was mixed with a profound sense of disbelief and utter disgust. This was my wife. This was the woman I had married. After the arrest, the GBI called me in for a full debriefing. Peterson and Davis sat me down, and over several hours, they painstakingly laid out every single sickening detail of Sarah's elaborate scheme. It was like watching a movie of my own life, but a horror film I was starring in. Mr. Miller, Peterson began, Sarah didn't just divert funds. Over the last 3 years, she systematically embezzled over $25 million from her multinational company. Through shell companies, inflated invoices, and manipulating offshore accounts, she siphoned off a staggering amount of money. $25 million. My head spun. That wasn't just pocket change. That was enough to fund a lavish new life for decades. They confirmed Dr. Roberts' critical role. She sourced a small, advanced private jet that was nearly identical to Sarah's corporate plane. Then, using her expertise, she modified it into a sophisticated drone, capable of flying a pre-programmed route and deploying an explosive charge at a precise location. It was a level of technical sophistication that still blows my mind. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision. This was years of planning, preparation, and investment. The escape itself was even more daring than Mark Jensen had let on. They didn't just parachute out. They flew the real plane to a remote section of the Caribbean at a very low altitude. Then, after deploying the drone plane and setting it on its course, Sarah and Mark parachuted directly into the ocean, where a waiting boat immediately picked them up. From there, they would have had access to their new identities, the cash, and their untraceable network to disappear completely. It was meticulously planned down to the last second. Then came the revelation about David Stone. He was more than just an affair partner, Mr. Miller, Davis explained. He was a complicit partner in the embezzlement right from the start. As the company's CFO, he had direct access to the financial systems and was instrumental in covering Sarah's tracks. He was going to escape with them. My jaw dropped. CFO. He wasn't just a pilot. He was a high-level executive at the company. That made his involvement even more egregious. So what happened to him? I asked, confused. Why was he found at the farmhouse with the others if he was part of the escape? Peterson grimaced. Our best guess, based on interrogations, is that either he got cold feet at the last minute and refused to jump, or Sarah and Mark cut him loose. They're both claiming the other left him behind, but the evidence suggests he was supposed to be on that boat too. Either way, he was a loose end they didn't manage to tie up, which ultimately led us to them. David Stone, the dead co-pilot, was a key to unraveling everything. The next steps involved meeting with the prosecutor. We reviewed the mountain of evidence, the fake passports, the offshore accounts, the detailed ledgers of stolen funds, the confessions, the forensic reports on the drone plane, the recovered briefcase. It was overwhelming, damning, undeniable. The prosecutor assured me they had an airtight case. Then, the floodgates opened. The GBI officially announced the arrests. The news exploded. High-ranking corporate pilot fakes death, steals $25 million in elaborate drone crash plot. Grieving widower discovers wife's shocking betrayal. It was everywhere, every news channel, every newspaper, every social media feed. My private nightmare was now a national spectacle. Our names, Owen and Chloe's names, were splashed across headlines. The GBI asked me to make a public statement. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Standing in front of a bank of cameras, blinding lights, with Owen and Chloe at home, thankfully unaware of the full scope of what I was about to say. I just tried to be honest, to convey the raw, profound shock and betrayal. I stood by my wife for 12 years, I said, my voice cracking. I mourned her. I believed she was gone. To discover this level of deceit, this betrayal, it's incomprehensible. Not just to me, but to our children who have lost their mother in the most devastating way imaginable. It was a public acknowledgement of the unbearable weight I'd been carrying. Jessica Stone, David's widow, also spoke out. She confirmed his involvement, his affair with Sarah, and her own devastation at his betrayal. I knew he was cheating, she said, her voice trembling. But I never, not in a million years, thought he was part of a criminal conspiracy like this. He stole from his company. He stole from me. He stole from his kids. Her grief in a strange way mirrored mine. We were both victims of their lies. The truth was out. The elaborate scheme was exposed. But the emotional wreckage it left behind was colossal. My world was completely upended, and the path forward felt utterly uncertain. The trial was a circus. Every major news outlet was there. Court TV had a live feed. My face, Sarah's face, Owen and Chloe's names, they were constantly in the headlines. It felt like the whole world was watching my life implode. I hated it, but I knew it was necessary for justice. Sarah, true to form, was unrepentant. She walked into that courtroom, head held high, looking completely in control, despite being shackled. She pleaded not guilty on all counts. Her defense strategy was to paint David Stone as the mastermind, claiming he had manipulated her, forced her into the scheme, and that she was merely an unwitting participant, a victim herself. She looked at me across the courtroom, a cold, empty stare, as if I was the one who had wronged her. The gaslighting was so extreme, even from behind bars, it was infuriating. But her accomplices weren't as brave or as stupid. Mark Jensen, David Stone, Dr. Emily Roberts, and even Uncle Ben, they all cut deals with the prosecution. They pleaded guilty to various charges or agreed to cooperate fully, providing testimony against Sarah in exchange for reduced sentences. It was a stark contrast to Sarah's defiant stance, and it left her isolated, with no one to truly back up her lies. When it was my turn to testify, I felt a strange mix of dread and resolution. I recounted everything, finding the empty ring boxes, the call to Goldberg and Sons, the discovery of the fake passport and offshore accounts, the prenup with Mark Jensen. I described the profound sense of betrayal, the emotional torment of mourning a ghost, the agonizing task of maintaining a lie for my children. My voice trembled sometimes, but I pushed through, my anger a steady undercurrent. I wanted the jury to understand the depth of her cruelty, the personal devastation she had wrought. The prosecution was brilliant. They laid out an overwhelming amount of evidence. The detailed financial records showing the $25 million embezzlement, the GBI's forensic analysis of the drone plane, Emily Roberts' testimony confirming her role, Mark Jensen's confession detailing the parachute jump and the boat escape, David Stone's testimony reluctantly confirming his complicity and Sarah's mastery of the scheme. They showed the jury the secret will, the multiple passports, the offshore bank statements, even the GBI surveillance footage of Sarah laughing at the farmhouse. It was an airtight case, built brick by painstaking brick. After weeks of testimony, the jury returned. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. I gripped the railing in front of me, my knuckles white. The foreman stood, and then the words came. Guilty on all counts. Fraud, conspiracy, faking her own death. The verdict resonated through the courtroom, a collective gasp, then a relieved murmur. I closed my eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. Justice. The sentencing came swiftly. The judge didn't pull any punches. He spoke about the egregious nature of the crime, the betrayal of trust, the financial devastation, and the profound emotional harm inflicted on her own children. He handed down a devastatingly long prison sentence, 25 years, 25 years. It was a clear, unambiguous message. Sarah, the architect of this monstrous scheme, would spend the prime of her life behind bars. She stood there motionless, her face expressionless, even as the gavel slammed down. Her accomplices received significantly lesser sentences. Mark Jensen got 10 years, David Stone 7, Emily Roberts 5, and Uncle Ben, given his coercion claims and full cooperation, received a suspended sentence in probation. It was fair, I guess, for their roles, but the biggest battle still lay ahead for me. I had to tell Owen and Chloe. I'd shielded them for so long, letting them believe their mother was a hero, gone too soon. How do you tell your 10 and 8-year-old children that their mother isn't dead, but a criminal who faked her death and abandoned them? I sat them down gently in their living room. I chose my words carefully, trying to simplify the monstrous truth. I told them Mom wasn't dead, that she had made some very, very bad choices and was going to be in prison for a long, long time. Owen cried, asking, "Why, Daddy? Why would Mom do that?" Chloe just went silent, her eyes vacant, a familiar, heartbreaking look. They struggled immensely. There were outbursts, nightmares, days filled with questions I couldn't fully answer. It was devastating to watch them grapple with the reality of their mother's actions. The woman they loved and idealized now revealed as a heartless stranger. It felt like another plane crash, a different kind, one that shattered their innocence, their belief in their mother, and their sense of security. The long road of healing had just begun. The trial was over, the verdict was in, and Sarah was locked away. But that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of figuring out how to live again. The dust started to settle slowly. One of the first unexpected blessings was a call from my old aerospace engineering company. My former boss, someone I respected deeply, offered me my old job back. He said they admired my integrity and believed I was exactly the kind of person they wanted on their team. NGL, it felt like a huge weight lifted. It meant financial stability, routine, and a chance to get back to something I was good at. I accepted immediately. It was a tangible step towards normalcy. Part of me, though, felt a burning need to document everything, to write it all down, not just for myself, but for anyone else who might be going through something similar. So I started writing a book. It's been incredibly therapeutic, a way to process the chaos, the anger, the shock, and the sheer disbelief. It helps me to organize the timeline of lies and betrayal and to understand how a person could be so utterly consumed by greed and deceit. It's still a work in progress, but it's my story and I'm determined to tell it. The good news on the financial front came through a few months later. The GBI and the federal prosecutors confirmed that a significant portion of the stolen funds, nearly 20 million, had been recovered from Sarah's offshore accounts. It was returned to her company, and thankfully, it also covered the legal costs and started the process of restitution for any other victims of her elaborate fraud. It was a huge relief knowing that her monumental theft wasn't entirely successful and that the company, which was also a victim, wasn't completely ruined. Owen, Chloe, and we started therapy almost immediately after the trial. It was tough, really tough, especially for the kids. How do you explain to a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old that their mother, the person they loved, chose money and a new life over them? We talked a lot, cried a lot. The therapist was incredible, helping us navigate the trauma, the betrayal, the anger, and the confusing mix of emotions. It's a long road, but it's a necessary one. We're doing it together. My entire focus became rebuilding a stable, honest, and loving life for my children. No more secrets, no more lies. I wanted to create a home filled with truth and security, something Sarah had utterly destroyed. We started new traditions, spent more quality time together, and I made sure they knew every single day how much they were loved and that they deserved honesty and respect. Slowly, incredibly slowly, I started to see them heal. The nightmares became less frequent. The questions about why mom softened into discussions about what's next. They started to understand in their own way the immense strength it took to uncover the truth, and I could feel their respect and love for me growing. They saw my integrity, my unwavering commitment to them, and that felt like the most precious gift after all the devastation. A few weeks after the sentencing, I received a call from Sarah's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson. It was a difficult conversation, filled with tears and raw emotion. They apologized profusely for Sarah's actions, saying they had no idea, that they were just as devastated and ashamed. They were mourning the daughter they thought they knew, just as I was mourning the wife I thought I had. It was a strange shared grief, and their apology, though it didn't fix anything, offered a small measure of closure for that side of the family. And then there was Jessica Stone. We connected again, not as strangers bonded by tragedy, but as fellow survivors of a truly insane betrayal. We shared stories, offered support, and found a strange kind of solace in knowing we weren't alone in processing such a bizarre and painful experience. She understood a part of this nightmare that no one else could, and that shared understanding became a quiet source of strength. Looking back, there's a profound sense of peace that has slowly settled within me. The rage still flares sometimes. The pain of betrayal is a scar I'll always carry, but I sought the truth, and I achieved justice for my family. The ghost of Sarah Miller, the woman who faked her death, no longer haunts our home. Now I'm embracing a new purpose. Through my book, through speaking engagements, I want to advocate for other victims of devastating betrayal, to share my story, and to help others navigate the unthinkable. My life was shattered, but I picked up the pieces, not just for myself, but for Owen and Chloe. We survived. And we're building something real, something honest, something beautiful from the ashes of her lies. The profound and continuing consequences of Sarah's betrayal are like a phantom limb. You know it's gone, but the ache remains. The trust, not just in relationships, but in the very fabric of my understanding of the world, was shattered irrevocably. Every decision I make now, every person I meet, is viewed through a lens of skepticism and the quiet understanding that the most unimaginable horrors can come from the people you love the most. Owen and Chloe, though healing, will forever carry the scar of their mother's abandonment. How do you fully trust again when your own parent orchestrated such a monstrous lie? Their innocence was stolen, replaced by a cold realism too harsh for children. Our family name, once a symbol of normalcy, is now irrevocably linked to one of the wildest betrayal stories in recent memory. This wasn't just a breakup, it was an explosion that changed our entire landscape. reminding us daily that some wounds, though they may scab over, never truly disappear. The world keeps spinning, but for us, it's a different world entirely.